there are three things that every prosecutor looks for: means, motive, and opportunity. And one of the means is, are the players connected? Well, it turns out that Bodin had been the guy to redecorate the French-style mansion in Washington that was bought by Lyndon Johnson, the old Pearl Mesta estate. Now, the reason that's important is because if you look at this connection of personnel, it means that Johnson knew Bodin. He could pick up the phone and say, I want this, this, and this done. And Bodin likely had more connections we're not aware of, because at that level, there's a lot of things that are connected. And so he carried out orders. It was not Jackie's orders. Jackie knew her president so well, she would never, ever have countenanced red. And she never got to see it. Remember, it was all taken down before she got back to the White House after Kennedy was killed in Dallas. So it all was done without her knowledge as well. By the time she walked in, if she ever did go in, we don't even know whether she ever visited the Oval Office after he was killed. That would be something interesting to track down. The point is that the same guy who put a Masonic pattern on the floor of Kennedy's cabinet room is the same guy who redesigned the Oval Office and then implemented it. The nexus of this, the connection is that John Kennedy himself set up the antithesis between those who would control the presidency from outside and the president being the President of the United States himself. In a speech in May in 1962, the same week, by the way, that he was redesigning Air Force One, he said this. Now, I know there are some people who say that this, he was talking about the steel crisis, is no business of the President of the United States, who believe that the President should be an honorary chairman of a great fraternal organization and confine himself to ceremonial functions. But that is not what the Constitution says. And I did not run for President of the United States to fulfill that office that way. So I believe that what got Kennedy killed is he also made enemies of the same people that we have documented in Dark Mission are in fact Masonic up to their eyebrows. That in fact are a great fraternal organization seeking to control the destiny of the human species to the point that they sent a Masonic flag to the moon in July of 1969, which was then brought back by this guy, an astronaut you might remember named Aldrin, and presented to a guy named Smith who happened to be running the Grand Temple in Washington, D.C. of the Supreme Council 33, which is just up the street from the White House at 1733 16th Street. And Robin and I have been there and photographed it in some detail. This is what it looks like if you stand in front of it. These are Egyptian goddesses and gods. This is Osiris and Isis. And of course, this is what it looks like at night. The White House is just down this street, just a few blocks away. And if you remember the film, The Day the Earth Stood Still, there's a shot. Remember when all the power is cut and for half an hour nobody can do anything? There's a shot in that film of the temple by Robert Weiss. What is the meta message Robert Weiss is trying to tell us about the influence of the Masonic people that run this temple in Washington in that film, which is all about how the world is being run and misrun and mismanaged, and that even when an alien comes and tries to get us to make peace with each other, he is shot and then killed. Eerie foreshadowing. And this, of course, is an aerial shot showing the fact that our nation's capital is filled with Masonic symbols. This is a huge Egyptian obelisk right outside the south lawn of the White House. And this, of course, is the Jefferson Memorial. Well, this president, John Kennedy, said, this is going to end. I will be president of all the people. I will not let secret organizations and corporations and others try to tell me how to run the business of the United States, and we have no idea how much more he meant than is on the public record, except from the symbology. The fact that this agency in what it was planning to do was, as Mike and I document, was most threatened. Oh, by the way, his first head of NASA, 33rd degree Mason, which you can see if you go to any Masonic site. You can see all the names of all the key players. This is not a complete list, by the way. It needs to be updated. So bottom line, one of the key enemies that John Kennedy had in what he was trying to do, whatever it was obviously the Nazis in this agency. Because there were Nazis in this agency. Who were they? Well, we know who they were. We know that space was so important because it was Wernher von Braun who basically connected with Kennedy in architecting the entire Apollo program. The same Wernher von Braun who, of course, is an SS officer, a lieutenant in the SS in Hitler's brigade. And all of the guys that von Braun, according to Operation Paperclip, brought with him to the United States from Germany after the war, all of them were ardent Nazis. If you look at their dossiers, it's astonishing that they were allowed to work under any administration, let alone this administration. Because, of course, the Germans and the Russians didn't get along, and you can imagine how they felt just as Germans, good Germans. The fact that this guy was going to give this guy everything they thought was theirs. And it all comes back to that rug. Oh, the other thing you need to know, Bodin, among his clients, worked for the German Reichsbank during the era of the Nazis. Adolf Hitler personally asked him to redecorate the interior of the German Reichsbank, which, by the way, historically, looks like this and has this interesting claim to fame. The German Reichsbank was the biggest counterfeiter. They tried to literally do what has been done now by the banking system to crash the global economy of the Allies by printing up billions of dollars of fake counterfeit money. It all came through this bank, which Stefan Bodin was the designer for under Adolf Hitler when Hitler personally asked him to redesign the bank's interior. Which then leads us to Jim Marrs' work. I strongly recommend that you read Jim Marrs because what we're looking at here is a pattern toward global fascism. A pattern that we see disturbingly in our own society over the last 46 years since John Kennedy was in fact killed. A pattern which goes back to the Kennedy assassination, and there is this astonishing summation by Laura Knight, who says that in the end, what has ruled America for the past 43 years, she wrote this in 2006, is a corrupt government that took power on November 22nd in a coup d'etat that worked from the day forwards toward the goal of turning the United States of America into a fascist machine for world conquest, i.e., the New World Order. A New World Order which is in front of this ticking Mayan clock, which has been obviously known and paid attention to ever since in the 40s, Harry Truman, through his SAC, the Strategic Air Command, figured out that something radical was coming and that something had to be done. A something which is exemplified by this man and this aircraft, leading, of course, to NASA's own secret mission to go to the moon and maybe bring back something that would help us change what is to come. Leaving us with the final question: what does Barack Obama know? Thank you.